Mentor. One of my favorite quotes is from the 1995 film Hackers, and it says, "Remember, hacking is more than just a crime. It's a survival trait." I used to live by this quote, as it pushed me to build my skills as an elite hacker. I never boxed myself in with black hat malicious hackers or white hat ethical hackers, and I always prided myself on forging my own unique version of a hacker's ethic. However, I found myself questioning my ethics as a hacker when the skills I'd honed over the years were used to take the lives of people who were very dear to me. Like most elite hackers, my story begins on the dark web. I'd been lurking around the dark web for as long as I can remember. I was active on underground hacking forums like HackBB in the early 2010s, and later joined the exclusive Dark Ode hacker forum before it was shut down in 2015. I'd also done thousands of hacking jobs on the dark web, ranging from penetration testing for criminal dark web marketplaces to DDoS mitigation consulting, escrow system audits, and infrastructure hardening for several dark web services. Hacking was my life, and I was never too far away from my computer. My social life was also abysmal, and I rarely spoke to anyone, with the exception of my little sister, Maggie. She was the only family I had left, and even though we were siblings, we were polar opposites. Maggie was a very social and outgoing person, and she would always drag me away from my computer whenever she visited, before forcing me to go home with her to have dinner with her husband, Neil, and my teenage niece, Charlotte. I never had a family of my own due to the nature of my job, and I never regretted that decision. However, I enjoyed spending time with Maggie's family, particularly my niece Charlotte, who was a very kind-hearted and compassionate girl. Her husband Neil was also a great guy, and I even looked forward to having dinner with them and catching up whenever Maggie came to visit. After having these occasional dinners with Maggie's family, I would bury myself in work, and when I wasn't working, I usually spent all my time on an infamous dark web hacker forum called CryptBB. I would read through hundreds of threads and make some posts of my own. I often left commentary, critiques, and high-level insights on recent breaches or OPSEC practices. I usually spent hours on the forum, and on one random Saturday, I received a private message from user 404. It read, "Hey, I appreciated your comments in the thread earlier. That's some high-level stuff. I'm a young hacker in high school who's starting out on his hacking journey, and I've read through most of your posts on the forum. I'm still learning and trying to understand which fundamentals to focus on first, and your insights have really helped me a lot. So if you have any advice, I'd really appreciate it." I'd already seen the young hacker in several threads on CryptBB, and I could tell it took a lot of courage to send me that private message. I was flattered by his appreciation, and his text reminded me of when I was just starting out. I sent him a response telling him to focus on the basics before moving on to higher-level material. I then told him that while I wasn't a mentor, I would gladly respond to any questions he had whenever I was free. This was the beginning of my relationship with the young hacker. User 404, we would send messages back and forth whenever I wasn't working on a job or having dinner with Maggie's family. I would send him several texts covering hacking basics like attack surfaces, OPSEC, threat models, and TCP/IP. I put an emphasis on networking fundamentals, as I told him that a hacker is blind if he doesn't know how data moves or understand how traffic flows. Once he'd covered the basics, we moved on to intermediate topics like enumeration, misconfiguration, access control, privilege boundaries, and credential reuse. In most of my text, I would remind him to think like an operator and to always put enumeration before exploitation. The young hacker was a fast learner, and it wasn't long before we'd reached advanced levels, covering topics like unauthorized access, lateral movement, and persistence, before moving on to logs and forensic artifacts. I explained how he shouldn't always focus on being clever, as he only wins if he leaves nothing behind. Over the course of these messages, I built a strong relationship with the anonymous young hacker. He would often joke that he was my young Padawan whenever I showed him something new. Our trust grew with each passing month, and our conversations sometimes veered into personal topics. User 404 would tell me how his high school was the seventh circle of hell. He explained how he was constantly being bullied because his classmates didn't get him. He then told me how Crypt BB was the only place he felt like he belonged, and how glad he was that I responded to his messages, as no one ever responded to his texts. I felt bad for the young hacker, and I tried to cheer him up by telling him that high school is hell for everyone, but it eventually comes to an end when you graduate. I then assured him that he'd probably have a better experience in college when he found his people, and even if that didn't work out, he could always spend all his time with his PC, before joking that computers are much nicer than people. User 404 then told me that he really didn't talk about what he was going through with anyone offline, and that our messages and hacking lessons served as a good outlet for him. I was glad that I could help him vent in between lessons, and eventually, User 404 told me that even if I broke the sacred hacker's code of anonymity, he wanted me to know that his real name was Billy. I appreciated his trust, but I warned him never to reveal his name again on the dark web, as that was the one golden rule a hacker should never cross. Even with that said, Billy's honesty took our relationship to another level, and we began to talk much more freely. He would tell me everything from weird teachers at school to how hard life was at home with his single mother. He even told me about his girl problems, sending a lengthy text explaining how he'd asked out a really sweet girl at school, only to be rejected. He said it hurt him badly, and I tried my best to console him by explaining that it happens to almost everyone, and it's a scary high school rite of passage. I told him to keep his chin up and assured him that he'd probably find someone else who shared his interests in the near future. I began to look forward to Billy's text, and even though I wasn't being paid for it, I enjoyed passing on my knowledge and hearing him vent from time to time. Everything remained normal for a while, until one fateful Wednesday when I received a strange, cryptic message from Billy that read, "Today, justice was served." Confused, I responded, "What do you mean, Billy?" It took a few minutes for him to respond, but Billy eventually sent a long rant about how he'd handled the people who had been making his life a living hell in high school. I remember having an uneasy feeling in my stomach, as I wondered what he meant by handled, and it was at this point that Billy went on to reveal how he'd used the things I'd taught him to get into the school's records. He told me he'd doxed the addresses of all his bullies online after illegally acquiring them from the student information system. He then anonymously called in SWAT raids on all their homes to teach them a lesson. I was horrified by Billy's confession, but that wasn't even the worst of it. Billy went on to explain how he'd compromised the account of the girl who had rejected him to get his revenge. He'd easily gained unauthorized access to private data in the cloud, which he used to release sensitive images to everyone at school, as he planned to embarrass her. He even went on to proudly state that he'd also called in another SWAT raid at her address to make her life even more miserable. I had no words. The messages Billy sent made me want to throw up, and I knew I had no moral high ground to reprimand him, as I never deemed myself an ethical hacker. However, I drew the line when minors were involved, and it sickened me that Billy had used the things I taught him to torment and traumatize a young girl for rejecting him. His repeated swatting also alarmed me, as I knew how dangerous it was. I immediately reprimanded him, telling him that no one deserved to have their homes illegally raided, even if they were bullies. I told him it was illegal to access and share private photos of his classmates, and reminded him that convicted swatters could face years in prison. Billy wasn't happy that I was displeased, and he sent a message that read, "I thought you, of all people, would understand." I was completely infuriated at this point, and I told him that his actions disgusted me, and that I never wanted to speak with him again. Billy's account went dark a little while after my last message, and I didn't hear from him again. The regret I felt for giving him the skills he used to torment his classmates began to eat me up inside, and I hoped none of the kids or their families were hurt. However, while I didn't know it at the time, I would later receive a morbid phone call that reflected just how grave the consequences of my actions were. My phone rang at 6:18 that evening, and I picked it up to hear my little sister Maggie wailing on the other end. Through sobs, she explained how a kid at school had leaked sensitive images of my niece, Charlotte, everywhere, which led her to take her own life. The news got worse from there, as she also revealed that Neil had been shot dead when someone called in a false SWAT raid on their home. Maggie had been picking up groceries when it all happened, and she came back to find a SWAT team surrounding the house. I threw up everything I'd had for lunch as the horrific realization dawned on me. The news of the incident followed shortly after, and I couldn't believe that that sweet girl Billy had described was Charlotte. The authorities said they'd managed to identify the perpetrator, a boy named Billy Coleman. However, he'd fled from home after being discovered, and the authorities were still searching for him. I could never look my sister in the eyes again, even after we buried Charlotte and Neil. The guilt I felt destroyed me inside, as I knew I'd given the skills to the person who killed my niece and my sister's husband. Maggie was never the same after their deaths. She lost the light in her eyes and remained a hollow shell in the years that followed. I didn't touch my computer for months after the incident, and even when I did, I couldn't bring myself to hack anything ever again. The hacking that used to bring me so much joy now served as a constant reminder of my niece's death, and I felt disgusted whenever I sat in front of a computer. I stopped taking jobs as I veered farther away from the world of hacking, and I used the money I'd saved up to take care of my little sister. I thought about telling her the truth, but I knew it would only break her even more, as it would destroy the image of the only person she had left. So I carried the burden of guilt alone, and dedicated my days to trying to heal the hole in her heart. It's been years since the horrific incident happened, but my guilt has only grown with every day that passes. Billy's actions left me with a lifelong lesson: how important it is to define your ethics as a hacker. You never fully understand how dangerous the skills you possess can be until you see firsthand how the same skills you once prided yourself on are used to harm the people you love. Several records show that there has been an alarming increase in documented cases of young girls taking their lives after intimate images were shared or circulated among peers without consent, and the story you just heard was written based on one of those cases. The details of the individuals involved in the actual case were redacted to protect their privacy. However, the anonymous story detailing the events is believed to have been released by the victim's uncle, who later confessed to his indirect involvement in the case. Several reports corroborate the details of the story, as there was another swatting incident related to the case that ended in the death of a 47-year-old man whose name was never publicly released. The victim's wife, whose name was also not released, was not present during the raid, and her current whereabouts remain unknown. The identity of the young hacker responsible was also redacted, as the name used in the story is an alias. This tragic case sheds light on the extreme dangers of swatting. In January 2025, the U.S. Congress introduced the Preserving Safe Communities by Ending Swatting Act to strictly penalize these hoaxes, with penalties of up to 20 years in prison if someone is seriously hurt during a raid. The horrific actions of the young hacker who maliciously used the victim's information have also led to a strong push for ethical hacking programs that allow young hackers to channel their skills ethically through cybersecurity education and bug bounty programs. Several initiatives focusing on structured pathways, such as Cyber First, in addition to positive outlets like CEH certifications, have emerged over the years. These initiatives guide talent away from illegal activities and toward ethical or white hat hacking. However, despite these efforts, many young hackers still prefer unethical or black hat hacking. These individuals choose to use their skills maliciously, with a majority honing their abilities on dark web marketplaces and services to this very day. I can say that I'm the only one to blame for this. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, just a quick job, nothing more. My name's Mark, and I'm a regular guy with a messy past and bad luck when it comes to women. When Sarah X started losing it, sending threats, showing up at my work, I didn't know what else to do. The cops shrugged it off, so I looked for someone else. I found her on the deep web. No face, just a name. Nix. They said she was a hacker who could handle problems nobody else would touch. I paid her to scare Sarah off. Nothing violent, just a digital warning. I thought it'd be enough to end it. It wasn't. At first, it worked. Sarah freaked out. Her phone went haywire. Emails got wiped. Social media accounts locked. But then, things got worse. Nix wouldn't leave my life. I knew it was her the moment my phone glitched, but this time it wasn't just normal hacking. The screen flickered and I saw a face. Pixelated, glitching, but it was there. She smiled at me, cold and sharp. No one else could have done that. I tried calling her, blocking her, changing numbers, but nothing worked. That was just the start. Emails with cryptic messages, my bank accounts drained, fake profiles spreading lies about me. But what scared me the most was how she always knew where I was. It didn't matter if I stayed at home or went to a cafe. She was there. I don't mean physically, but her presence was there, suffocating. One night, my laptop started typing by itself. Lines of code I didn't understand poured across the screen. And then a message appeared. Give me a chance. Let me in. It wasn't just hacking. It was something else. I was trapped. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come out. Before I can explain what happened next, imagine this. You're alone. Every device around you starts acting like it has a mind of its own. The lights flicker. The air feels electric. And in the back of your head, there's this cold presence, watching, waiting. You can't touch or see it clearly, but you know it's there, and it's not going away. One night, my smart home system locked all the doors and windows. I couldn't open anything. The thermostat dropped to freezing. My phone displayed a live feed on my own bedroom from some camera that I never installed. A voice came through the speakers, distorted, almost inhuman.
Why do you reject me?
I pounded the walls, tried smashing the system. Nothing worked. The entire house felt like a cage. Then the power cut out. Darkness. Total silence. Then the screen of my phone lit up again. She was there, smiling, closer than ever. The days after were worse. She didn't just want to scare me. She wanted to ruin me. My work emails got sent to my boss with death threats. My friends started receiving strange messages from accounts that I had never created. Every aspect of my life started to fall apart. The tension was unbearable. I felt watched all the time, followed. But no one saw her. I couldn't explain it. Every device was a weapon. My phone called me at all hours of the night with the same glitching face appearing. Sometimes the screen would crack, but when I touched it, my finger bled. Not from the glass, but from nowhere. It was like she was bleeding through the screen. One night, I found a file on my computer called For You. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a video of me sleeping. Not just from a camera in the room, but from multiple angles. Some I didn't recognize. She was inside my house without me knowing, I deleted it quickly, but the damage was done. She was everywhere. I tried to fight back. I called the cops again, but they thought I was crazy. No proof, just stories about a hacker stalking me. They told me to get help. I hired security experts, but every time they tried to trace her, their systems crashed. Devices in their office started acting up too. One by one, the people I hired gave up. The paranoia ate me alive. I stopped sleeping. Every notification on my phone made my heart jump. Her presence was always there, inside every machine, every shadow of the digital world. I started seeing glitches in reality. Phones ringing with static. TV screens showing distorted faces. Once, the reflection in my bathroom mirror blinked when I didn't. She started contacting my family, sending photos and messages only someone inside my home could have taken. My sister stopped answering my calls. My friends stopped trusting me. My job disappeared overnight. The chaos was total. Then came the message that broke me completely. If you don't give up, your loved ones will be next. After that, I stopped trying to fight. Her presence was everywhere. I deleted every account, destroyed every device. I left my apartment and tried to disappear. But no matter where I went, she followed. My life was shattered. No jobs, no friends, no family. Just her in every screen, every digital bite. There was no escape. No way to undo what I started. Months passed, and I'm broken. The police never found a trace of her. No hacker could pull off what she did. She's not human. I stopped trying to fix my life. The digital world owns me now. Sometimes, when I turn on a screen, I see her smile. That cold, empty smile that means I lost. I'm trapped in a prison built by wires and screens. She is really crazy for me. And the worst part? She never shows up. She's just there. And I'm like her pet. This story is inspired by verified reports of criminal activities linked to the dark web. Certain characters, names, and scenes have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. Viewer discretion is strongly advised, as the events depicted involve disturbing and mature themes related to online crime and exploitation. They always tell you to be careful on the internet. Don't talk to strangers. Don't share your personal details. But when your heart is aching for something pure, something good, you forget how dangerous hope can be. My name is Alina. I'd been trying to adopt a baby for almost 3 years. Every agency, every interview, every background check led to another dead end. My husband and I were told we were still under review, or that there were no available matches. It felt like time was slipping through my fingers. So when I found a Facebook group for mothers giving up their babies for adoption, it felt like a miracle. The women there were kind, compassionate. They posted photos of newborns wrapped in soft blankets, messages filled with love and regret. One post caught my eye immediately. Young mothers seeking kind couple to adopt baby girl. Please DM if serious. No agency involved. Her name was Mira. Her profile looked real. Pictures with friends, posts about pregnancy cravings, a small-town address. She said she couldn't afford to keep her baby but wanted to make sure she went to a good home. For weeks we talked. She sent photos of the baby's ultrasound. Tiny hands curled like petals. I promised to give her daughter everything she couldn't. And for the first time in years, I felt something like happiness again. But hope, I've learned, can be the cruelest illusion. Because what I thought was a miracle was bait. It started with small details that didn't sit right. Mira said she lived in Iowa, but her phone number had a Nevada area code. She said she was staying with an aunt, but when I asked for the hospital where she planned to deliver, she changed the subject. Still, I pushed those doubts aside. I wanted to believe her. One night around 11 p.m., she texted us. I went into labor early. The baby's here. She's perfect. I want you to meet her before I sign anything. My heart leapt. I woke my husband, tears already streaming down my face. We packed a bag, printed out the messages, and started driving. Mira said she'd meet us halfway at a motel off Highway 18, near a small town we'd never heard of. It was snowing by the time we got there. One of those lonely stretches of road where the lights buzz overhead and everything feels suspended in silence. The motel looked almost abandoned. Only 2 cars sat in the parking lot, ours and an old dented white van parked under a flickering light. Mira texted again. Room 9. Don't knock. The baby's sleeping. I remember clutching the tiny blanket we'd brought. My husband squeezed my hand. We were nervous, but also excited. This was the moment our lives were supposed to change. But when we reached the door of room 9, it was slightly ajar. The air coming from inside was cold, unnaturally cold. There was no sound, no baby, no crying, just darkness. My husband called out softly, Mira? Something moved inside. Not a person, more like a shadow shifting across the floor. Then a voice, deeper than I expected, said, You came. And that's when I realized there was never a baby. The moment that voice echoed out, everything inside me went still. It wasn't Mira's soft tone. It was male, rough, deliberate. My husband's hand tightened around mine and I could feel his pulse hammering. He whispered, Stay behind me, and slowly pushed the door wider. The room was lit by a single lamp, its shade tilted, casting long, distorted shadows across the stained carpet. The bed was unmade, sheets half torn off, and on the dresser, there was a baby blanket, identical to the one I was holding. That's when my stomach dropped. He'd known. Whoever this was, he knew everything. My husband called again. Mira? And stepped in. The door creaked as it swung open behind us, and before I could say a word, it slammed shut with a violent crack. The lock clicked. Then came footsteps from behind the bathroom door. He slowly emerged, mid-40s, wearing a dark hoodie. His eyes were hollow, but focused like he was studying us, enjoying the fear unraveling across our faces. You shouldn't have come, he said, voice calm, almost amused. But you were desperate enough to, weren't you? He gestured toward a laptop sitting on the table. Its screen was open, and a dark web forum glowed on it, post after post titled Infant Exchange, verified buyers only. And there, under our messages, was our photo, the one I'd sent to Mira to prove we were a real couple. It was captioned, Confirmed. They'll drive anywhere. I felt my throat tighten. He'd been watching us, tracking us for weeks. Every message, every video call, every piece of hope we'd clung to had been a setup. Then he smiled faintly and said, The baby was never real. But you two, you're worth something. My knees nearly gave out. My husband tried to step forward to shield me, but the man pulled a knife from his hoodie pocket, glinting under the lamplight. "Sit," he ordered. I remembered the sound of my own heartbeat, the hum of that motel light, the smell of metal and dust. Somewhere outside, a truck passed by, its headlights sweeping across the thin curtains for a second, and that was enough. My husband lunged. The next moments blurred. The crash of furniture, my scream, the blade slicing air. I ran for the door, hitting it hard, twisting the knob till it cracked. My husband yelled something I couldn't make out, and I stumbled into the night, barefoot, snow soaking my socks. When I turned back, the man was gone. So was my husband. I don't remember how long I ran. The road blurred into a tunnel of white and shadow, every sound behind me feeling too loose. My hand shook so badly I dropped my phone twice before the screen finally lit up. I called 911, voice barely steady enough to speak. When the patrol car's headlights cut through the fog, I collapsed. They found me crouched on the side of the highway, barefoot, crying and clutching that tiny blanket, the one that had lured us there. I kept repeating my husband's name, but I already knew deep down. Something in me knew he wasn't coming back. The police searched that motel for hours. Room 9 was empty. No man, no blood, no sign of my husband. But the laptop, the one on the desk, was still there. And that was what led them into a nightmare far bigger than just us. It turned out Mira wasn't a woman at all. The account was traced to a network of anonymous users operating through hidden dark web forums. They called it the Cradle Exchange. Investigators uncovered threads filled with cryptic messages, fake adoption profiles, and digital bids on expectant parents desperate for a child. My emails, my photos, my messages, they'd all been sold. The people behind it didn't deal in babies. They dealt in humans. The man at the motel, just a recruiter. Someone who lured hopeful couples, promising what they'd never had, then sold them off to whoever paid most. When police ran the footage from nearby security cameras, they found one clip, just seconds long. A grainy frame showing my husband being forced into the trunk of a black SUV that disappeared down the interstate. He was never found. And Mira's last message to me, sent minutes after I escaped, was short, almost mocking.
You should have known better than to trust a ghost.
That line haunted me more than anything else, because in a way, he was right. I had trusted a voice without a face, a promise without proof, and an offer too good to be real. Months passed before I could even open my phone again. The yellow ghost logo that once meant connection now felt like a threat. Police said the investigation into the Cradle Exchange was ongoing, but deep down I knew they'd never really shut it down. You can delete an account. You can even burn a motel to the ground. But the dark web doesn't die. It waits. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when a notification pings unexpectedly, I still hesitate before looking, because part of me is terrified it'll say, "Mira, I missed you."